This episode of the Durian Pod is brought to you by Hexclad, official cookware partner of TDP.
On this episode of the Durian Pod,
to see public art do that to a neighborhood and transform it was really powerful. It's different than gallery work. It's different than anything else that you can do because there's no barrier to entry. If you can walk down the street, you have access to the art.
Yeah.
You have to wait weeks and weeks and have it look like shit for a while.
Right.
And people are walking by and you're just like, it's not done. You know, like, the things that scare you are the things that you need to move toward, right? Because if you get into the habit of moving away from stuff that scares you, that's all you do your entire life. It's like everybody gets that thing.
Yeah.
Mine was anger. Some people, it's their own self-esteem.
Right.
For other people, it's sadness. And whatever it is, like you just have to know everybody gets lucky in certain ways and unlucky in certain ways. And this is your unlucky bit. I think your job is to like carry it with dignity if you can.
Cheers!
Cheers, guys. Sip, sip.
Sip, sip.
What is good, everyone? My name is David.
And I'm Jasper.
Behind the camera, we have our wonderful Heidi.
hello.
And this is another episode of the Durian Pod. This is the show where we showcase our friends who have fought against societal standards but still made it to the top. Today we have very cool guest. He's an artist. He's a 3D art creator. He's a muralist, having painted many murals amongst LA, also various cities in the United States. Today, put your hands together for John Park.
What's up, John? Welcome.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah,
Also, I know we kind of touched on it a little bit, but congrats on the wedding, the marriage.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I know you said it's been a while, so it must be really exciting.
Yeah. It's definitely more emotionally impactful than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
I think.
But it's good to have you here. I know we talked about this a little bit, but like I first met you at a Factory 93 event.
Wow.
Do you remember that? It was like this like really purple, really blue portrait of a female.
Yeah.
And I when I walked up into it, I think I went by myself actually. When I walked up to it, I was like, oh, that's like gorgeous. But you were still finishing up. And it was just like really, it just drew me in. And that's when I first learned about you. And then here you are, you know? So pretty cool. There's a question we kind of just asked in the beginning just to kind of get you warmed up. But like, what was your welcome to the industry moment? I know you, especially in the LA area, you kind of started doing murals when it was like a newer thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, in that process, when did you realize like, oh, wow, like this is, you know, it's not fun and games anymore?
Maybe it was right when I started. So I'd been sort of knocking around the gallery scene since maybe 2010. And then 2012, I had this friend who was an art manager, and she basically was trying to manage a couple of people like me and some of my peers. And she said, you know, I'd have a much easier time selling you if you were also a muralist. And that was very, very direct advice. So I was like, okay, let me jump into this. And I think she got me one of my first gigs. It's like this building up on Hollywood. It had like 4 people just come for the day and paint, not even a big deal. And then after that, I got another mural on Lincoln Boulevard with this company. At the time they were called Beautify Lincoln. And that was when I was like, oh, I was part of a whole project where they were trying to put 50 murals on Lincoln within the course of like 2 years. That's right. And they really transformed this. It was a kind of beat up, ugly looking stretch of Lincoln, basically from the bottom of Santa Monica through Venice.
Got it.
Yeah, I think it was like 48 or 50 murals went up in that space, and it just transformed everything. Like it was almost like the businesses got more foot traffic, and because the walls were decorated as opposed to just being sort of vandalized, it encouraged more people to come into the area, and so it created like a virtuous cycle.
Like another draw to come there and like check out.
And just seeing like, oh wow, like public art drove this, you know, like it wasn't the Chamber of Commerce. It wasn't, you know, like, yeah, the timing was great because the timing just happened to work out where a lot of money was flooding into Venice at that time. Because I remember 2011 is when Google bought the Binoculars building, and they bought like a whole block in Venice. But you know, all of that sort of coincided with it, and to see public art do that to a neighborhood and transform it was really powerful. I was like, wow, it's different than gallery work. It's different than anything else that you can do, because it literally is, there's no barrier to entry. If you can walk down the street, you have access to the art.
That's dope.
Yeah.
So mural, you weren't drawn to murals yourself. You just kind of like, it was like I guess a blind date, if you will, and then you kind of, you know, took off on that, right?
Yeah, I mean,
or did you have like an initial prior like attraction to it, somewhat?
no, it kind of made me afraid at first. Because like I remember when I first started looking into murals and graffiti art and stuff, I just couldn't figure out how they did it. I couldn't figure out how do you get, you know, an accurate drawing up that size and get it looking the way that you want it, you know, because when you're up close on something really big, you can't step back and take a look at it. And that's something like, as a painter, I would do that constantly, stepping back to see it from farther away and whatever. And so it just seemed very daunting to me. And then once you sort of figure out what the techniques are and you realize, oh, it's not mysterious, it just takes a lot of planning. So then you just have to like change your mode, because I was never like super organized as an artist. But when you're doing like 5,000 square foot plus mural, you have to be so organized or you're going to lose a shitload of money.
I'm even picturing, like, for example, like your paint cost alone. Like, if you miscalculate that, 5,000 square feet is a lot of space.
Yeah.
Like, and you just talked about how you're doing something that's like in the
12.
12.
Mm-hmm.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
That's an entire warehouse, essentially. So,
And I have miscalculated my paint cost before, to my chagrin.
You come home with a bunch of paint. Like,
Oh, it's
hey,
been-
honey.
Yeah, again, it really is just, you just have to be so organized. And then once you know what the plan of attack is, it's actually pretty straightforward. And it's really cool because, like, there have been so many instances where I'm painting something, like, say, a portrait, something pretty detail oriented, and I'm up on the wall. I'm like, this looks like shit. I can't believe like how badly this is going today.
yeah.
And then you get off the lift and you get on the ground level and you're like, oh, it looks great. Like, it looks so different when you're up there, because like every little flaw, every little thing is so apparent. But then the second that you step down, you know, if it's a 30-foot tall wall, you got to get at least 20 feet back before you can start to see it in its in any kind of like, you know, context. And so all of these like little mistakes they just disappear.
Well, I'd like to get little mistakes out of the way and actually give you some really little bites instead that are delicious.
That sounds great.
I think it's the perfect time for us to walk into the amuse-bouche.
All
And
right.
I'm going to go ahead and prepare that, and I'll be right back.
Okay.
So, John, I know that you haven't been to Roslyn before.
Yeah.
And so what we'd like to start you here at our supper club is always an amuse-bouche, something that's very fresh, exciting, bright. And I thought it was actually very much so after kind of seeing your work. A lot of that is relevant to how you design or paint all your murals. So came up with a dish that is very vibrant. You'll notice that on the bottom, there's 2 layers of heirloom tomatoes. These are imported from Mexico, so they're right in season, very bright and sweet right now. You have that rainbow colored red, purple one on the bottom, and then a bright orange one above it with some basil that's grown in their garden here outside. On top of that is gonna be king salmon from our friends over at Lux Seafood. Went ahead and done crispy skin, flaky, delicious. And then it's finished off with some red chili oil from Fly By Jang. So
Wow.
a couple layers in there. There's the glaze of the fish sauce that brings the umami out. So there's a lot of layers. I'd like to call this a caprese with a salmon on top, essentially. But I hope you enjoy this first course. And it's kind of my way of saying thank you for being on the show, but also respecting your work in the way of how bright and beautiful it is. So
Wow. Well, I really appreciate the consideration, and God, I can't wait to dig into this.
yes, please do. Let's cut through. This is
do
a
it.
fork and knife amuse.
amazing.
Obviously, way bigger than what we would normally serve.
Are you
'cause
sure this is the amuse?
I mean, this could be our favorite dish as well. We'll see. Let's find out. So.
Oh gosh.
Wow.
Nice crunch.
salmon is cooked perfectly.
Okay.
This state is so hard to capture, where it's still soft inside, but not slimy.
Good, good.
And it flakes, but it's not dry.
That's exactly what we're looking for. Something that's a little juicy, layered, a little bit of crunch.
Yeah, the crispy skin. Wow. So crucial.
So, John, I know you were born in Korea.
Yeah.
Which city? Just
Seoul.
Seoul.
Yep.
Okay. And then you moved here at a very young age. Can you kind of tell us about your upbringing, what experience was like?
We moved here when I was 3, and my dad, he didn't really have a plan, because at the time he was having these like weird health things that he didn't know, because this is like 1976 Korea, so the healthcare system was just not even really there, and so he had no idea what was wrong with him. So he really thought that he might die, and back then in Korea, there was no such thing as public education. So it meant that if he died, then my brother and I would probably just go work at a factory, starting at when we were like 9 or 10. But my uncle was living in Maryland. He was working for IBM. So he told my dad, like, hey, in America, the government at least pays for your kids' education until they're 18. So we just moved. We're like, okay. And so we moved with no plan.
Wow.
And of course, ironically, as soon as my dad got in front of an American doctor, he was like, oh, you have an ulcer. Here, take this medication.
Okay.
You'll be fine.
Was that what it was? Really?
Yeah, it was just,
Damn.
and it was like one simple medical intervention and he's fine. But I think because we didn't have a plan, we just kind of, I don't know, he was chasing job leads, and then we ended up in Columbus, Ohio.
I see.
And we just settled in Columbus. And so I grew up in Ohio in like the early 80s. And, you know, it's kind of probably a common story for a lot of people my age, where you move to a town, very few Asian people. Me and my brother were like one of maybe 8 Korean kids in a high school of 3,000. So, you know, just kind of grew up in the Midwest, and then was lucky enough to go to art school,
I see.
which was kind of chancy, because at the time, I don't know, it's like you're in Ohio and there's no internet, so you don't find out about shit.
Yeah.
You know, so
Because there's no internet at the time, or because Ohio doesn't have internet?
at the time the internet didn't exist.
Okay,
got
guys.
it.
Just curious.
Yeah. I think even now, I'm sure their infrastructure is fine. You know, Columbus is a weird, it's like a blue dot, you know, in sort of a sea of red. But yeah, I was just kind of lucked out where basically up until my junior year, I thought I was going to join the Marines, because I'm like, I can't do pre-med, I can't do pre-law. I don't want to go to college for anything else. Like, I'm not interested in anything else. And so it just seemed like a logical step, and my parents were fine with it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, all Korean men have to serve in the military anyway. So they were like, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, compulsory military service in South Korea for men. And so they were like, yeah, it'll teach you discipline. Like, fine. And I think they were relieved that I at least had some kind of direction.
Yeah.
But then one night we had a friend, like a family friend over, and she was going to Brown. And when she saw all the artwork in my room, she was like, hey, you should go to RISD. I was like, what's that? I had no idea. And, you know, God bless her, she said the exact right thing to my parents. She said, it's the Harvard of art schools.
Hey.
That's all they had to hear.
So they're like, okay.
Yeah. They're like, well, then we can send you there. I'm like, okay.
The way you pronounce it is kind of funny. It sounds like the university for Riz.
Riz.
Yeah,
Yup.
Risley, where you go to Disneyland, but there's Riz.
Uh-huh.
Risley, got it.
Anyways,
Yeah.
but so what drew you to art then? Like, you know?
That's, I mean, I think my earliest childhood memories are drawing. So that's just always been present in my life. I'm not exactly sure like what drew me to it, but
No pun intended. Because
yeah. But, you know, like specifically, like I remember when I was really little not being able to draw necks.
Draw.
Just necks.
Oh, next.
next.
Yeah. I could draw the bodies and I could draw the heads, but I just couldn't figure out necks.
So you just like draw no neck.
No, I'd start drawing scarves.
Oh
Right.
my god.
And so it turns out that's a classic like illustrator's
creative.
trick, right?
Really?
And so
Okay.
yeah, so it's I was already in that mindset from the time I was very, very young.
Yeah.
But then when I was in middle school is when, so my parents had these like Korean religious books, but each book looked like an encyclopedia, like a set, and each book had a dust jacket that would come off.
Yeah.
And the dust jacket was a close-up of a different part of the Sistine Chapel. And I remember we were latchkey kids growing up, and so we would come home to like an empty house. And so I would come home and I'd just take all the books down off the shelf, and I'd take all the dust jackets off, and I'd just lay them on the ground, and I would just spend hours just looking at them.
Wow.
So I was just so fascinated by the way that he painted figures, and like the drapery, and I already knew about the piece of work. So I already knew that this is a very important piece of work. This is like humanity has decided this is one of the 5 best things that a person has ever painted. And so I knew that as well. And so once I became obsessed with Renaissance art, then I discovered like Da Vinci and his like unfinished treatise on anatomy, and that became my obsession, and then it guided me all the way through college.
Got it. And at that point, that's when you learn how to draw necks.
Yeah.
Right.
At a certain point in between
There you go.
I learned
I
how to
love
draw
that.
necks.
There's still scarves. It's just neck texture.
Yeah.
That's just so fascinating to me because like my parents forced me to go to art school.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, and this
this.
is a
Yeah.
kind of I don't really talk about
Deep
it.
cut.
Yeah, deep cut. Yeah, it was elementary and middle school. My parents were kind of insistent on it because my dad actually studied graphic design
Oh, wow.
in college, and so being able to see his work and very much similar in the fact I remember I was in middle school. There was this top shelf in my parents' house, and I saw these like binders. They were so like meticulously organized. It was actually like all of his typography that he had kind of drawn out. And because of that, I was like, I want to go to art school. I'm down. And little did I know that I did not receive any of that talent. Not very good at design, aside from maybe like graphic design per se. But when it comes to having that visualization, I think that curiosity was always there.
Yep.
But I guess I didn't get that amazing spark that you got, John. So
That's cool though that you sort of discovered your dad's like what he does, and I think most people don't even think about that when they look at typeface. Up until very recently, every font that you see and use was done by someone by hand.
yeah.
Like at the end of that supply chain is some guy with a 00 brush and a jeweler's loop, and he's painting those things by hand, and that was that way until probably 2000.
Yeah, shout out to Times New Roman. Courier Sands or whatever. It's fine.
Looking back on your career, can you tell us a story about an inflection point or a point that you were kind of just so low in your career that you wanted to kind of quit? Like maybe this is not for me. Maybe I made the wrong decision.
Yeah. Well, actually, I can tell you about almost the opposite happening, which was there was a really big point for me in 2016. And that's when I decided to leave the whole gallery scene. So up until that point, I'd been really trying my best to, get to know different curators and go to different galleries and, putting my stuff into group shows and, sort of like trying to sort of establish a foothold in that world and start climbing like everybody else around me. Then that year I had a 2-man show at this, it was a gallery in Venice called Cave Gallery. And I had a great show. I sold 80% of my work. And that show showed me that the gallery scene is not financially viable for me because that show could not have gone better. I mean, I literally sold most of the pieces before the first opening.
Wow.
A collector just bought most of them. And then once I broke off 50% to the gallery, and then I looked at how much time it took me, and I'm like, that doesn't work. Like the math just doesn't work. Like I couldn't have made it go any better than this, and it doesn't work. And so I just had to face the reality where I'm like, okay, well, you can't do this for a living. But at the same time, I had been painting murals for 4 years, and I'm like, wait a second, because the last mural you did, you made almost as much as the 3 months it took you to get ready for that show. And the mural only took you like 2.5 weeks. And so I'm like, okay, well, great. I've already got that all set up. And it seems like public art is more in demand with each passing year, and I've just been super lucky on that front because it has, and it's one of the only aspects of visual art right now that's not directly threatened by AI, which is crazy
Yeah.
to think about. I mean, I've already started using Midjourney with my mural
Wow.
designs. Yeah, because I'm like, hey, this is a shortcut, and other artists are using this right now. So if I don't become friends with this, and if I don't figure out how to incorporate this into my practice, I'm gonna get left behind.
I see.
And so it might come to a point where copyright laws, they decide like, hey, no one is allowed to use this stuff because it takes unfairly from images. That's fine. The second that they discontinue it, I'll stop using it. But until that point, like, you know, you adapt or you die. So
Yeah, interesting.
Absolutely. I mean, you see that in the culinary industry too. There's a lot of chefs that are, instead of using Google, right, you are literally asking GPT, you know, this is the recipe that I currently use. I find it too salty. I find it too acidic. I'm getting this type of feedback. What would you do to adjust it? And it'll actually spit out a new recipe that adjusts for that.
yeah,
It's scary, but
that's
also
based
really
in
cool.
fact, like
Yeah.
based in actual practice.
Yeah, it's cool.
That's nuts.
How have you like you've been using it personally? Like how's it have been affecting the space now? I mean, sure, like there's that fear of it's gonna completely just render a unique image, and that could replace, you know, an artist's opportunity. But what about now, where it's not so? I don't know. Actually, you don't know if it's that intense yet.
We're seeing the beginnings of the market penetration. You know, obviously with the text-based programs, you don't have a single person in the corporate world right now that doesn't use this stuff for their emails now and for their daily quotidian tasks that they can't stand, and like all these things that like it's already helping with those things, right? Visually, I mean, I feel bad for my illustrator friends. I really do, because Midjourney, you know, these programs, they can crank out a 4 variations of an idea within about 90 seconds that might take a professional illustrator a week to render, right?
Yeah.
Where they're getting paid $1,000 a day to do this. There's no economical model against it. And at a certain point, you're going to have the first feature that uses these tools, right? They're going to say something like, oh, all of our storyboards were generated with AI, or all of our previs was done on Sora, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
After that, I mean, geez, it's off to the races.
And that would normalize it a little bit, right?
Well, no, it's going to democratize it for sure,
Yeah, yeah.
right? But you have this entire industry that's just rife for disruption right now, right? Because Hollywood is kind of like higher ed and healthcare, right? They've been escalating their costs with no real justification. You know, this like a degree isn't worth 400 times what it was worth, you know, in 1995. Well, it costs 400 times, right? You're not getting 400 times the value from it, right? A trip to the hospital, you're not getting healthier by 1,200%. Guess what? The fucking cost is up by 1,200%.
Yeah.
So Hollywood's been like that for a very long time, right? Where you have these inflated budgets that keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger every year. And it's finally taken this kind of like past year of Disney just absolutely hitting the side of a mountain with every single movie that they release, where they've lost over almost $1 billion in the last year. And now they're going to go, holy crap. Like, we have to like stop the bleeding. We have to cut the fat. We have to get rid of like basically half our people. And then what they're going to find is that they're just as effective because these new tools are so mind-blowingly good, and they circumvent so much of the process. I mean, if you look at these videos now,
Oh yeah,
Sora,
yeah.
like think about what it takes to actually stop and film something. The number of people to just carry lights, right? And to tape off like where you're going to film, and like so many people are involved in that. And now suddenly it's none of them are involved.
Yeah.
It's
So as an artist, how do you navigate through this? Like, it's still a little bit early.
Yeah.
You can kind of maybe prep for it, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, I think I'm probably in the same boat as a lot of artists, where part of me is petrified, part of me is absolutely despondent, because I can see the long-term effect that this is going to have on the next generation's curiosity about art, because it's tough. It's hard to learn how to draw. You know, it's
Yeah.
hard to learn how to play the piano. It's hard to learn a foreign language fluently. Like there are things that we reward in this lifetime because we understand how hard they are. They're difficult. When you meet someone who's a doctor, you respect them immediately because you know what it takes to get through med school. You have some idea, right? And so you go, wow, you have disciplined yourself in a way that I never could. And because you can do that, I respect you, right? And so art, it is that way, and it always will be that way. But I think you're going to have a cooling effect because what you'll find is that only the richest people will have the largesse to actually pursue something like art when the practical reason for art keeps getting circumvented by these AI tools, right? There's no longer a reason to pay a concept artist $1,000 a day to come up with some really cool ideas for your character. You just do a 4-line prompt, pay $24 a month, and you're there.
I can't comprehend that, like drawing would become a dying art. You know what I mean?
There's a lot of things that are at risk with the development of AI, but
crazy.
like you said, John, it's about like adapt or die, right? And I remember even when I was in the tech industry for a long time, the last company I worked for, it was about adapting to cryptocurrency. The company I worked for basically helped launch Ethereum.
Oh my God.
And so seeing that evolution, like if you're not catching on this wave, you're going to die. And that's exactly what's happening in the financial institutions right now is you see digital currencies. We have digital USD. I'm seeing that in art. You're seeing that in culinary, even in pharmacy. They're developing AI tools essentially to replace pharmacists to the point where a pharmacist will literally just be the one signing off on it. Like the AI tool will be like, this is the diagnosis, this is what it's going to be, this is what we think, 98% probability, yes or no.
Yep.
And you're literally just the person signing off the legal responsibility.
We had a meeting about that.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, we have an AI tool where it literally like skims like doctor chart notes, and they pull all the information, and then obviously that's just like a scanning tool, right? But then what the AI part does is it like summarizes it so that it's like clinically accurate, and then I just have to go, pick my nose and hit yes or no.
Yeah, I read about this. That's crazy you had a meeting about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's coming into fruition. It's insane.
Yeah, well, and we're in that same sort of transitional phase that elevators and elevator operators were back in like the 1920s, right? Because there used to be like a career. It was an elevator operator, right? So it was a skilled profession because you had to know when to stop and start. You had to like read where the ground was going to get. And like the good elevator operators would stop it exactly so that there was no like raise or lower.
The other ones that you had to climb out.
Yeah, that was a vocation. And then what happened was the elevator operators went on strike. They demanded higher pay. They had these buildings by the balls. Like business literally could not get done. Money could not be made in New York. And so the owners caved and they gave them more money and more benefits and everything like that. And then the second time they strike, they just replace them with new technology. And at the time, they were like, look, people aren't going to want to get into an elevator without a human at the wheel. After a couple of generations, why the fuck would you want a human? Do you know what I mean? Now we don't even question it. We would question if there was a dude standing there with a lever. You'd be like, I'm not getting in there. So I think right now, AI, we're in that weird state where we don't trust it unless a human signs off on it. But it's only a matter of a couple of generations.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Before people are like, why would I want a human interfering in this beautiful, seamless, artificial intelligence that's so much faster and less emotional? And
yeah. So John, I know you started off with just gallery and just kind of traditional paintings, but when you transitioned into murals, what is like the most favorite thing about that transition, and also like what do you still find most challenging?
Definitely my favorite thing about murals is the ability to go really large scale with imagery, where that's just a really unique thing for a visual artist to be able to experience, right? Like someone's trusting you with their building, right? Like once you get past 3,000, 4,000 square feet, like these are giant projects, and they usually involve, architectural firms or design firms or city entities or something like that. And so it's a huge responsibility. But then at the same time, that's also what makes it so difficult, because you just end up having to do so many more things in preparation for a project like that you would never have to do for a painting. And so you don't get to see the pretty picture on the wall. You have to wait weeks and weeks and have it look like shit for a while. And people are walking by and you're just like, it's not done. You know, like, and you have to do it all publicly. You know, like, and that's the thing. It's a love and hate relationship because that's what makes public art so great is the lack of a barrier. But that's also what makes it frustrating because anyone at any point can come and vandalize it, can come and spray over it, and that's the agreement that you make with the world when you go out there and you put yourself out there like that in public. Is you go, anyone's entitled to criticize this in any way that they want,
Right.
including vandalizing it, and you just have to be good with it.
Wow.
Has that happened to you already?
So it's happened to a couple of pieces. One because it was there's one I have on Cahuenga that keeps getting tagged because the piece is on the back of this parking lot, and they have these two lights that shine down on it. And every time the lights burn out, it gets fucked up. Because it just, it's like once it's suddenly in a dark corner as opposed to a lit up corner, it just encourages all kinds of bad behavior. But for the most part, I've been really lucky with my stuff.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Your work is pretty bold and vibrant, like kind of Jasper mentioned earlier. And what I notice is, especially when you have subjects in them, there's a lot of emotion, that goes through the whole image. They say that, Asian people have a little bit difficult time expressing their affection. Our parents, how they say "I love you" is cooking up a bowl. Thank you. You love me. You love us, right? Cooking up a bowl of whatever, right? And saying like, that's their "I love you," right?
Yes.
And so
acts of service, that's their love language.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so for you, kind of growing up in that household, did you have that challenge, or did you have that experience kind of expressing those emotions onto your work, or like did it?
It's funny because like I never quite looked at my artwork the way I think a lot of my peers did, where I never looked at it as an outlet for my emotions. I always looked at it as like, this is going to be the ultimate source of my skill and discipline. And so I approached it in, I guess, a slightly more detached and professional way than like a passionate, like, this is who I am. I knew that it was. I knew that like, this is who I am. I'm expressing to the world who I am through this medium. But I always made the emotion secondary, which I guess is pretty emblematic for, like people growing up in a sort of a quasi-Confucianist household where emotions were expressed differently. Like I always tell my non-Korean friends, I never once saw my parents fight, ever.
Wow.
Never once heard them yell at each other. Never once saw them disagree in public. Never once. Also, never saw them hold hands or hug or kiss each other. And up until my brother and I went to college, never hugged us. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and they just like, they can't understand how that works. Like it's a weird dichotomy with, I think, a lot of immigrant families, because you have this old school immigrant mentality that is tough. And it's born of people who were created from a really tough world. You know, like my dad was 9 or 10 when the Korean War started.
Wow.
And, he and his family lost everything.
Yeah.
They went from my grandfather, I never got to meet him. He was some kind of business owner, and then they became refugees. And after they were refugees, even after the war ended, they were homeless. So it was like, it just took away everything from a lot of people. And so that mentality created hard people. And then when those hard people come into a soft society like America, right? Because like when my American friends found out what would happen to me when I got a B, holy shit. First of all, they couldn't understand being punished for getting a B, right? So that was a whole explanation thing. And then the actual punishments themselves, they couldn't believe.
Yeah.
Because it was always physical. It was either like direct, back and forth, forehand, backhand slaps to the face, or it was like the kung fu shit where I'm holding up boxes filled with weights and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it was a tough upbringing. And so I think that you end up getting all these mixed messages about, like, I know for me, like, I have lifelong anger issues that I have to deal with now. This is my burden, right? So it's like every time I get into a car, I have to basically like say a serenity prayer and like understand that I'm going out into a world where not everybody cares about the rules and not everybody thinks that they share the world with other people. And I have to be okay with that. And it's not my job to police them or to make them drive the way that I would wish them to drive. And it's also not my job to get stressed when they don't do that.
Yeah.
And that seems like a very elementary, simple thing, but it's like literally my lifelong struggle. And I know that when I'm 90, I'm still probably going to be talking about it.
Right.
And it's fine. It's, you know, it's this mental health stuff. I think a lot of people have this idea that like it's a destination, right? Or it's like a degree. It's like once I figure this out, then I'll have this degree and like calmness, and then I can go on. It's actually more like working out. So you can be on top of it, but the second you stop, it goes away.
Yeah.
So it's like a daily practice where you just have to say like, no one's ever figured out how to let this gotten to the point where they could just go, okay, now it's on autopilot.
For sure.
It's like everybody gets that thing.
Yeah.
Mine was anger, you know, like some people it's their own self-esteem.
Right.
For other people it's sadness.
Right.
You know, like, and whatever it is, like you just have to know that everybody gets lucky in certain ways and unlucky in certain ways. And this is your unlucky bit. And so I think your job is to like carry it with dignity if you can.
So through those ideas, is that how you put it on a canvas or through paint or
Yeah.
like how did you know?
One thing that I definitely like to do with my more sort of independent work, because a lot of my mural work, I end up having a lot of client feedback. And so they'll give me a creative brief before I even begin. But when I'm doing my own work, I actually really like states of ambiguity, right? Like I've kind of, my brain has always been that way. Like my favorite times of day are always dawn and dusk, right? The transitional periods, right? I've personally always felt very much like a transitional type person. Like I'm not exactly Korean, I'm not exactly American. Like I'm this weird hybrid of different things. And I've never felt like I truly belonged anywhere, right? And so I kind of take that like idea with me. And so when I'm doing my own work, I really like to inject a sense of ambiguity into the emotions, you know? Are they sad? Are they happy? You know, like with like my floating figures, were they flying? Were they falling? Like they're in a state where they're in transition. They could be one or the other. And ultimately, I like to leave it up to the viewer because I think that when you have a sense of ambiguity, when you have a sense of mystery, it's what brings people back, right? Because if you feel like you can encompass something in one viewing, what's the point of seeing it again? Whereas if something's kind of like, you can't quite let it go, you know, you'll see that movie, it's kind of haunting and you just can't, and then I have to see it again, you know? And so it's because we're these curious little monkeys. We love puzzles and we love games and we love figuring stuff out and tinkering. And so when you give somebody something like that mentally, I think it helps to kind of like bring interest.
I see.
So interesting, the parallels that as you talk about everything when it comes to art, you know, obviously I'm not an artist in that sense, but
Well, you're a food artist, so.
thank you. You're too kind. But like, I'm seeing all these parallels. You know, one of the things that I was taught by several of my mentors is some of the best dishes in the world are not things that are cut like directly to the cloth, right? Where it's like, I know exactly what a mashed potato and a steak tastes like, right? It's about creating a level of curiosity in your dish where you taste it and you go, what was that spicy element that was sitting there? Or like, what was that smoky element? I'm so fascinated. And then you want to go back for a second bite and then a third bite and a fourth bite. And like, next time I'm coming back, I have to have it. I really liked it. I don't know why, but I really like it. And everything that you're talking about, just even the way you're describing is like your art gallery work versus a mural work. Right? I'm sitting there going like, that's very much so like when we are doing like an individual plated dish that's like maybe for the photos or for Instagram, whatever else. And it's highly curated, exactly that one person gets to see it or taste it. And then it's us doing the catering gigs with hundreds of people. And we have that same exact problem. It's like, guys, the food's not ready yet. They're just hawking over, waiting for you for the dish to be ready. But then you finally have an entire table full of food. And I just think it's so cool to see that level of parallel that I never kind of saw before. So I appreciate you sharing that.
I mean, I would imagine that when you boil down the arts, right, no matter what your form of expression is, it really just comes down to like, you are trying to take something that's in here and you're using a medium of some kind and you're trying to bridge the gap between the thought and being able to put it in a form that you can share it somehow, right? Like, here's a piece of food that you and I can both share and eat together. Or like, here's a piece of music, you and I can both hear it. And I think that's the act. That's the sort of the truly basically fundamental human thing that we are all drawn to, whether we acknowledge it or not. You know, the second we have any free time, we gravitate towards some kind of art, right? Whether it's a podcast or a movie or a book or, you know, a piece of music or something. And, you know, like that, I think we can't help but do that. You know, I think that will always be our driving force. You know, as soon as we were able to lift ourselves out of the food chain, we created this whole new sumptuous world of like possibilities where, you know, like survival wasn't the thing anymore. We don't have to worry about survival. And then inversely, as kind of a very ironic thing, we now have all of these survival instincts that were super good at keeping us alive that suck, that are terrible for being in civilization, where you don't have to worry about survival. So like we're negatively biased. I was just talking to my wife about this the other day. That's terrible for people in society because we don't have to be negatively biased anymore because not everything is trying to kill us and not every situation we enter into is dangerous. But, you know, we still have like 10 million years of biological wiring that we have to get around before we can figure out like, oh, we don't have to concentrate on just the negative things. We can enjoy all the positive comments. And we can forget that one negative comment. That motherfucker, you know. It's psychology, you know. And it's the same thing. Like we evolved this amazing like reward system, you know, like with serotonin and dopamine, and it's designed to drive our behavior, and it biases us towards fat, salt, and sugar. Because in nature, those are very, very hard to get, and they're instant energy sources. And so our bodies are like, go find those things. Well, now we live in a society where those are the most sort of like present ingredients in all of our food, and it's killing us. We're literally eating ourselves to death because our instincts haven't caught up with our society.
Right.
And you know, I think that we're in a state. All artists are doing that right now. We're all just trying to figure out like, how do you get this stuff out of your head in a healthy way and share it?
Well, I'd love to take this time to share something with you.
Yes.
I think it's perfect time for us to do our favorite dish.
All right.
It is something that is just something that we serve on the menu here at Roslyn. I'm going to go ahead and prepare that and then bring it over to you guys.
Okay.
Yeah? Okay, I'll be right back.
There is salt, sugar, and
There's definitely fat. There's definitely fat and salt on this one.
Yeah.
Well, they're better.
I'm just kidding. I'll give you a vegan biscuit. I'm just kidding. I'll be right back. So this is our favorite dish, also known as one of the main dishes that we do over at the Supper Club. It's always very hearty and full and flavorful. And I also, again, wanted to bring out some of the colors to really pay tribute to the work that you do. You have a house-made green onion pancake. I learned how to make that a couple months ago and figured out how to make it a little fluffy. Please forgive me if it's still not all the way there. We have purple cabbage that has been pickled and then stir-fried and then flame-throwered, so it has that beautiful char. And on top, I heard from a birdie that you love steak. So we have Australian Wagyu ribeye here. And it is a BMS 6.7 from our friends over at Ligma Provisions. So for our viewers, you already know what BMS is. But if not, Aussies rate their steak from 1 to 12. A5 is 12 out of 12. US Prime is a 2 out of 12. We have a beautiful BMS 6.7 gold. So fatty, marbled, delicious to counterbalance that pickled purple cabbage there. We finish it off with our yuzu garlic crema, which is a roasted garlic sauce with a little bit of cream. It's fresh, bright yuzu in there as well. I recommend wrapping it up like a burrito. I think that's the move. So yeah, enjoy. This is a
Thanks, chef.
Thank you.
this is a big biter. This is a big
Wow,
biter.
wow, wow.
Sometimes I just want you to keep talking.
Just sometimes.
All right, let's go.
Let's see if we can eat this. There's a lot of meat in this. It's like if you order double meat from Chipotle.
Yeah.
I might need a fork for just the meat by itself.
This is like the best tasting taco I've ever had.
Oh my.
Yeah, the chewiness of the wrap works really well with the fat from the Wagyu, which is a constant note.
I know you've been in this space for a long time, and probably the successes are gradual. But was there a project, or was there a story? Was there an interaction where you kind of self-reflected and you said, "Wow, like I am an artist. Like this is it. Like it's not just in like 1 foot in, 1 foot out."
In terms of muraling, it was my first large-scale project back in 2018. I did a mural project in San Diego that was about 6,400 square feet. So it was 2 main walls that were 45 by 68, so 45 feet tall by 68 feet long. And there are 2 of those, and then 2 accent walls that were 45 feet tall by 10 feet wide.
Where's this at?
It's the old San Diego Tribune building.
Okay.
In Mission Valley in San Diego. That was really the first time that I had, that level of responsibility, that scale, that level of detail where, I really was going into this project, like not knowing how I was going to do it.
Yeah.
It was just one of those things where, like, I had known for a very long time that, like, the things that scare you are the things that you need to move toward, right? Because if you get into the habit of moving away from stuff that scares you, that's all you do your entire life. And so I just know from experience that if something scares me, then it's probably something I should try to do. And this was one of those things where as soon as I got the text from my contact at the architecture firm, he showed me the diagrams and he said, "Hey, let me know if this is a scale you're comfortable with." And like, I almost had a nervous breakdown. Up to that point, I hadn't even done 1,000 square feet, let alone 64. And so I knew in theory it was possible, but I had no idea how. And I was just like so nervous and like even shaking when I was sending back the text, where I was just like, "Yeah, sure, sounds good. Like let's talk this week." And I sent the text, and then the rest of the day I'm like, "What the fuck? Holy shit!
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? You're gonna ruin your reputation. You have no idea what you're doing." And then that day, I saw a quote from James Watson, who was part of the team that discovered the double helix, the DNA. So Watson and Crick.
Yeah.
And his quote is, "If you're going to do something extraordinary, you are by definition unqualified to do so."
I like that a lot.
Damn.
And I wrote it on the wall of my studio like that day. And every time I would start to get panicked or nervous, I would just look at that quote and I'd go, "No, you just have to keep going." Like, eventually I figured it out. And yeah, it turns out as long as you have enough time and you have enough sense to think about it logically, you can figure it out. You can get it done. Because unlike what those guys did, like what I'm doing isn't rocket science. And it's not, you don't need an 8-year degree. Like it's just a matter of hard work.
I would give yourself like definitely more credit than just hard work though, right? Like to be able to even switch from like, say like a gallery portrait where you're on a canvas to that scale, right? Like
Yeah.
to put that into perspective for a lot of people, I don't think people understand how big 6,400 square feet is.
Yeah.
Like a typical apartment in LA is about 800. So you multiply that times what? Like 8
Yeah.
times the entire floor plan of your apartment. I think that speaks volumes to how big that work is. And I think also speaks volumes to the amount of work that you've had to put in to make that happen. Right? Because you jumped from 1,000 to 6,400.
Yeah.
And for a lot of like perspective wise, like it's almost like a TV. Like going from like a 42 inch to a 60 inch is not relative, it's exponential. Right? So the work, the paint, the understanding, the prep,
Yep.
exponential amount of work.
Yep.
So that's incredibly impressive.
And that tends to be the biggest barrier to entry in large scale muraling is just the actual logistics. So gridding is like the most basic way of transferring. So I always knew I could do that, but gridding is time consuming. The real professionals do what's called paper pouncing. And paper pouncing it's actually the technique that Michelangelo used to transfer the images onto the Sistine Chapel. And it's still the most widely used technique for huge scale pieces. And what you basically do is you print the entire mural to scale on sheets of paper. And then I have this machine called a pouncing machine where you put the pieces of paper onto a piece of sheet metal, and then you take a stylus and you draw over all the lines, and the stylus is hooked up to a generator, and a spark will actually punch thousands of holes through the paper. Then you take the pieces of paper one by one, line them up on the wall to where they need to go, and then you take a bag of graphite powder and you rub the graphite powder over the lines, and it transfers the powder in a dotted line onto the wall.
Whoa.
That's wild.
And it's still super time consuming. So paper pouncing is actually how we did this mural that I just finished working on in Scranton that we're going back for 3 months this summer. So that whole thing was pounced, and I think for half of the wall, it was like 104 scrolls. Each scroll was 20 feet long by like 3.5 feet wide. And so you end up with like 50 pounds of paper. Just
Wow.
Yeah, just the rolls themselves.
That's crazy.
my
Also, you
gosh.
just said Scranton,
Pennsylvania.
yeah,
Yep.
Pennsylvania. Okay. What was the inspiration? Are you a huge Office fan, or like what? Why that city in particular?
So it's where my wife is from. She was born and raised in Clark Summit, and so I guess it was when the city, they initially put out a call to local artists because they wanted a local artist to do these retaining walls for their expressway. And I guess after the first year, they didn't get submissions that they liked, so they opened it to national. And as soon as they opened it to national, we got calls from 3 of Julie's relatives, who live in Scranton, and they were, different uncles or aunts, and they were like, "Oh my God, like we just heard about this. You guys need to apply for it." So it was just an open call, and we applied and ended up getting it.
That's crazy.
I was thinking the same thing. Shout out Michael Scott.
Because when you said like 50 pounds of paper, Scranton, I'm like, Dunder Mifflin is a paper company. Is this the
Yeah.
inspiration? I was just, all right, okay. You used Dunder Mifflin paper, didn't you?
Always.
Hilarious. Speaking of large scale, have you guys heard about? It's in the news right now. There's like this abandoned
Yes.
Oh yeah.
skyscraper.
Ocean-wide
Yes,
towers.
yes.
Oh yeah.
So 27 stories high, abandoned because of whatever reason. Some people say money laundering. Some people say just honest bankruptcy. But yeah, and it's obviously getting tagged, as you know.
Yeah.
There's people like base jumping off of it. Have you guys seen
That
the
looks
video?
like fun.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen the dude? He's
Yeah.
just with the parachute just
Yeah,
flying
just
off of
legit,
it.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
crazy. I heard there was rave. I don't know, call them raves, but like parties there. It's just because it's abandoned, people are taking advantage of it.
Where's our invite for that?
Hey, I'm not throwing the party, but we would love an invite. We would love an invite. But like, what are your thoughts on? Because you're a muralist. You are in the public space as far as art.
Yeah.
Graffiti can be looked at in the same light. What are your thoughts on graffiti and maybe what's happening to that building?
I personally love it. I think, even though I don't come from that background, like I came to muraling from a fine art background, I know there are a lot of muralists who come from a graffiti background. So they start writing letters and stuff and doing pieces before they actually switch to like more fine art stuff. And so there is a lot of back and forth in those worlds. I think it's awesome. Obviously, when you have a building that's that size that just doesn't get completed, it becomes a blight, Like it goes from a project that's supposed to benefit the community to a huge eyesore. And so for these graffiti artists to come in and make something of it and make a community and to gain national headlines, I think it's awesome. I think it looks cool. I personally think it looks cool. Obviously, some people see it as vandalism, technically, because they're not getting permission. But, you can see that there are some actually really, really talented artists that are going up there. And, I know it's illegal, but they're still putting in their time and effort and their, blood and sweat. And they're taking a huge physical risk going up there. It's not like there's safety railings or harnesses. These guys are doing everything guerrilla style. And I totally respect that. I think that there's definitely room in cities for that kind of art to live side by side with more sanctioned muralist type work that I'm doing. I think it's a mistake for cities to try and wholesale remove that sort of thing because they think it's illegal or it's some kind of bad influence. It's a different style of art. The one thing you're maybe going to do is do the Streisand effect, where the more attention you call to it to try and get removal from it, to try and remove it, the stronger it's going to get and the more robust it's going to get. And so I just love the irony too.
Yeah. Have you guys gotten a chance to check it out?
It looks so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so impressive because you see it on like the drone footage, but
Yeah.
then when you actually see it
Yeah.
in real life, like looking up at this building, like you can see the letters like from
Yeah.
the ground.
Yeah.
Did you ever, have your hand in aerosol at all? Have you? Have you?
Yeah, I mean,
Or a better question is, will you put your imprint on the Oceanside building? We got your back. We'll be at the lookout.
yeah, I think starting pieces at my age probably not the best idea. I mean, I'd never did graffiti. I never really even used aerosols until about a year and a half ago. I switched because one thing I realized is for portraiture, aerosols are about 5 times faster than brush, and you get better results. So I had always known, like, I got to learn this stuff. I just have to teach myself. And I'd always put it off. And then finally I think it was the end of 2021, I got an Oculus.
Oh yeah, the VR. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
cool.
And so there's a game on there called King Spray. It's like a graffiti simulator.
Yeah.
And so I trained myself using the Oculus.
Wow.
No way.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there like a 5 stars cops thing? Like GTA?
But I mean, so it's accurate enough to where it trains your coordination.
Wow.
So you can
that's
actually.
cool.
So I did probably 2 or 3 weeks of like 8 hours a day on the Oculus, and then did my first physical piece with spray paint. And I was,
on like at your own place or
yeah, like on a piece of plywood.
okay,
And then after seeing that, I was like, I might be able to use this professionally.
dude, that'd be sick.
So I
That's so
practiced a little bit more on the Oculus, and then started incorporating it into my work professionally, and it's like transformed my entire like professional practice.
That's dope. Yeah. What do you guys think about like, having that type of art like side by side? Like, I know some cities really embrace it. Some cities, reject it. They want it more clean. Like, I could never see Seattle ever having that. But I feel like Berlin, I forget where else, but they have literally an alleyway full of just like graffiti.
Yeah.
And like it rotates kind of like your menu, but it rotates every so often because there's new like artists coming in and showcasing their ideas. But like as far as LA goes, because I know you're native. Do you guys welcome that? I'm obviously a transplant, so
I mean, I think it's cool to see different forms of art show. And I think the question for me that kind of runs into is what is the boundary of what sanctioned versus unsanctioned is?
Mm-hmm.
Because it is one thing, in my opinion, where it's like cities like, hey, this whole area like Venice, we're going to go transform it. Let's make it beautiful.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what beauty is because everyone interprets art in a different way. But for them to be like, hey, we approve this, do it. We just like your style, John. Like, we like your style. Like, whoever else is going to do this. And it's like, great. I think what I like, where I kind of have that kind of hesitation is when you kind of see free tagging or just kind of defacing of other people's work. It's like someone worked really hard to make that beautiful. Like there's a mural of like Kobe somewhere. Like there's a mural that you've set up, and if the moment the light turns off, that shouldn't get defaced.
Right.
And I think that's where I would personally draw the line, but I love seeing cities embrace more of that. I remember when I was in Portland recently too, there's complete sections of the city that are all giant, beautiful murals. Like even near the Nordstrom in downtown, there's a mural nearby it, and that was unheard of a while ago. And that's just all it required was some city official saying, we're going to make that someone's piece of artwork. Let's let them do it. And they trusted them fully. So I love that.
yeah. Heidi, what about you? Like, I know you grew up in the 626. If something like that happened in that area, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like growing up, this is similar to what John said about like city officials maybe thinking that graffiti is a quote unquote bad influence. I think growing up, there was that message of like people who do graffiti, people who skateboard, like you don't want to be associated with those people. But, like I think growing up, especially in LA and knowing people who tag, knowing people who skateboard, it's not about that. It's about creative expression. And a lot of these folks, I think, are in this like alt subculture that actually makes our mainstream culture even more unique and interesting. And so I think that having graffiti is important, like that style is important. I do wish that there was like more space for that so that it's not just like, on someone else's piece of art or just like some random person's house or on people's cars that like they didn't say that, they didn't give permission for. So I feel like if there's just more of like communication and consent about it, and then I think it could be really cool.
I mean, they have
Yeah.
the walls by Venice, right? So those are sort of like free wall. You just sign up for them, and then when your slot opens up, you go and you put up whatever you want. And I do think that the existence of those kinds of spaces does tend to help mitigate unwanted graffiti, like in other spots. And, you know, like you said, sometimes if it's someone putting a tag or a throw up on top of someone else's mural, like that sucks. That's disrespectful and it's wrong. But at the same time, it's also like sort of what you need. Like you have to accept that that's gonna, like if you want this form of expression, you're gonna end up with these people too, right?
Right.
Because there's for every good thing, there's always a bad thing that comes with it, right?
Right.
There's balance in everything, and so you have to accept the bad with the good, and I think it's more important for cities to acknowledge like, hey, this is a valid form of expression, so we better have places for people to do this, or they're going to find their own places.
Right.
They're going
right.
to make their own spaces.
Yeah.
Speaking of making space, I would love to now serve our final bite.
Oh man,
It is the most decadent, luscious, extra dish that we always do. It's the last thing you have at Roslyn. I'm gonna go and prepare that. I'll be right back.
okay.
Oh my God.
That is beautiful.
This is almost bigger than one of your murals.
Oh my god.
I hope you're all ready for this. Normally, the final bite is something very small, but I'll be honest, I've been very hungry all day.
Okay.
And so I thought to myself, why not showcase something that I think is just epic on a grand scale? One of our favorite bites right now is a cebuchon. It's a Filipino style, almost like lechon, but it's from the Cebu region. And what makes it different is the aromatics that go into it. So I'm actually going to go ahead once I get off the mic. I'm actually going to pull off that roasted lemongrass that's sitting on the middle. Immediately, the whole room is going to smell like that. The inside has mala powder from Fly By Jing, shallots, scallions, garlic, coconut vinegar. The outside, Korebuta pork belly from Japan. So layered, fatty, absolutely stunning. The basil is on there not just for show. When the grease kind of hits it, warms up all the aromatics. The side though is a sauce that we make in-house, which is our cilantro, Sichuan peppercorn, scallion chimichurri, also known as yeet hay. Absolutely favorite sauce right now. It's for everything and anything, especially this meat. And on the side, I tried to duke you guys. It's roasted persimmon from my family's garden with a little bit of roasted shallots. So I'm actually going to go ahead and slice this up on camera away from the mic. You'll hear the crunch of the skin. It's incredible. And then I'm going to plate it for you guys in front of everything.
Oh
So
my god.
talk about final bite. So here we go.
God damn. Damn.
That sounds crazy.
Oh, thank you.
This is the biggest last bite ever.
Dude, I feel like I'm at Thanksgiving.
Make sure we get a little bit of salt on that. A little bit of salt. You need more salt or you okay?
Oh god. Well, the crisp skin, and then you immediately get the fat from the pork belly. It works so well with the kind of the curry spices. What is that again? Mala powder?
Yeah, mala spice mix from Fly By Jing. They're friends of ours, and there's a little bit of cumin that really shines. That's what I love about it. There's also some like fried chili peppers and really just nice in general. Please dig into the cebuchon. I can't take full credit for this dish. This is something that my chef team has worked incredibly hard for. Shout out to Chef David Phillip and Chef Denise.
Shout out
You
to
guys,
David and Denise.
you guys are the real ones. But cebuchon is very much so. They're part of their Filipino heritage, and we've kind of taken the combination of Cantonese and Filipino together by putting this dish together. Very much so like suyok or roasted pork meets cebu. So please dig in, enjoy. Oh, you can hear that.
God, it's so crunchy.
It works so well with the persimmon
Incredible.
too.
Oh, really tender, man.
Wow, incredible.
Damn.
Yeah, I wanted something a little bit sweet to balance out the insane amount of flavor that's coming through the cebuchon. You know, the fat. There's a little bit of acid from the chimichurri, the umami, from the layers. The skin is lightly dry aged as well as in our fridge in the back. So there's a lot going
Oh,
on.
wow. Is that why it's so crispy?
Yeah.
John, we're coming on the last leg. We always love to ask the guests, because they're so entwined with what they do and they've been around that space for so long. What is a really specific piece of advice that you kind of hold really close to you that you can give to an aspiring artist that maybe wants to break through, right? Instead of just being stagnant, and also maybe, or even like maybe stay relevant?
For me, the most important thing has always been how I approach my work. So all artists are constantly juggling between fantasy and reality, right? They're lofty artistic aspirations, and it's balanced out by their financial needs. And then they have to try and bridge the gap. So they have to figure out a way to express themselves in a way that satisfies them, where they can grow, but can also pay the rent. That equation can destroy an artist. And I've seen it really mess with a lot of my peers in terms of the way that they work, the way that they approach their work. You can become obsessed with pricing. You can become obsessed with value of, am I being valued? Am I being paid what I'm worth? And I've had, a lot of peers kind of fall into this. I think it's a logical mistake, but it's still a mistake, which is they'll say something like, well, they only paid me $1,500, so I'll give them a $1,500 mural, right? So the idea is that they begin to tailor the amount of work that they're putting out into the world based on what they're being compensated for.
I see.
And while that's a very logical thing, and I think that what it will do is it will give you a short-term gain, in the long run, I think it's very destructive, because what they don't take into account is that that mural might be there for the next 10 years, right? And anyone that walks up to it, they're not going to know how much it cost. They're not going to know how long it took you. They're not going to know anything internally about that piece. The only thing that it can do is stand for itself, which means that unless it has certain intrinsic qualities that make it worthy of your attention, it becomes a bad representation of you. And so you might think, oh, I got my value's worth because I only gave them this thing that they paid for. I've always found that it's like, okay, I'm going to negotiate hard for the price, right? I'm going to negotiate hard for my position. But once all of that's done, and now it's time for me to start designing, I still try to just give them a piece that's going to be beautiful, that it's obvious there's a lot of work put into it, and that it can stand on its own. When it's robbed of all of its context and all of its meaning, and you have no idea who did it or how much it costs or anything like that, then it should still stand on its own, because this is literally like these are calling cards that you're leaving around the world, and you're literally putting your name onto it. I think that it's really worked well for me, because what I found that as I progressed through my career is I don't do any marketing. I don't do cold calls. I don't email people. They find me. And part of the reason why I think they find me is because no matter what piece I'm working on, I absolutely put my complete effort, 100% of my soul goes into that. And then, you have to be able to then do that for the next piece and the next piece and the next piece, with the idea that you're hopefully getting incrementally better with each piece that you do, so that maybe in 2 years you look back and your work is completely transformed. And, those changes come small, but as long as you're sort of in that growth mentality of like, there's always some place to go. There's always something new to learn. I can always be a student of this for the rest of my life. I read something about Michelangelo. I don't know if it's accurate or apocryphal, but it certainly has stuck with me, which was that, when he was 88 and he was on his deathbed, he basically said, there's still so much that I have to learn, right? So this is someone who kind of approached their entire life with this philosophy of like, I can be a student. There's always something for me to learn. And I think what that does is it prevents you from drinking your own Kool-Aid. It prevents you from taking yourself too seriously, which I also think is the death of creativity in art, is when you begin to feed your ego instead of feeding your passion, right? And so, yeah, I think that ultimately it's that saying, how you do anything is how you do everything. And, to just try and make an effort to carry that into your life, because Your life affects your work, and your work affects your life, and the two things are inseparable. And if one is a mess, invariably the other will become a mess. And so it behooves you to kind of get everything cleaned up.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Wow.
That's very deep. Yeah. Like literally put your 120% every time, right? Because
Yeah.
If you can, unless there's some physical limitation why you can't do it, then I understand, right? But the idea is that you're bringing your best in every situation. Your best is going to fluctuate depending on if you're sick or if you're well, or, you know, if you're in a good mood or in a bad mood. Your best is going to vary. But as long as you're trying to put out your best in whatever situation, then you should be okay.
I love that.
Very similar to the conversation we were having at the beginning of the podcast too, where it's like you are kind of given these confines. Like this is your restrictions. You might be, for example, not the best mood, or maybe this is the budget that you're given in, but that's still going to be the best version of what you could provide using that specific framework.
What I find oftentimes happens is that these outside limitations that seem like such a pain in the ass in the beginning turn out to be the levers by which you do your best work.
Yeah.
And that happens so consistently with me that I try not to bitch when I get that kind of feedback. I still do, but I try. I give it a shot.
Thank you for sharing that. I feel like that's such a gem you just dropped, and I think the cameras all shook when you did. But what can we expect next from you? I know you just did a beautiful mural at the LA Wine and Food Festival.
Yep.
Really dope piece. I saw, your wife was there, so I'm sure she had a hand in it. And
Yep.
what can we expect from you, from John Park?
So I'm jumping into a private commission that I'll probably start this week, and that'll take me into the summer. And then this summer, my wife and I are traveling back to Scranton to finish up our big 12,000 foot piece for the county of Lackawanna. And that'll take us into November. And then, we just have some trips. I think we're actually going to Korea at the end of October. And then we're going on a 10-day sailing trip through the British Virgin Islands.
Wow.
That's dope. Are you an adventurous eater?
Yeah.
Well, today we have our dessert course, and you have the opportunity to indulge in the durian fruit, hence the durian pod. So
That's my face. Yeah.
what? Your face, you didn't look too.
No. I definitely want to try this.
Have you tried it?
No, I never have.
What are you expecting?
I'm expecting something that tastes vaguely like a persimmon, but smells like diarrhea.
Okay, well, I'm gonna bring it out
Hold
to
that
you,
expectation.
and I can't wait. I can't wait to open your third eye.
Uh-huh.
Let's do it.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes.
All right. So go ahead and give it a shot. If you want the camaraderie,
So do you just
we will do it.
eat the whole thing, or
Eat a piece
Eat
of
a
it.
piece.
There's a seed in the middle, but yeah, it looks like you cut around it, so very nice. And
Okay.
let's see what you think.
Just thoughts.
smells herby? Smells grassy?
Okay, that's better than trash or diarrhea.
You know what? It smells like spring onions,
Oh, okay.
Was it stored with some spring
like
onions?
a scallion.
There is. I'll explain it after. Let's see.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Tastes like spring onion.
A lot of people say durian has almost like a caramelized green or white onion
Yeah.
taste. But it's
like-
a little sweet.
It tastes almost like a
Bite.
scallion pancake or something.
He's going in for
Seconds,
seconds.
yeah.
He's going in for seconds. It's real.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
It's good.
okay. Let's go. That's 2 for 2.
Very
You
nice.
guys, we're changing the narrative. Durian is not that bad.
Yeah.
I still disagree, but that's fine.
You don't like it?
I don't like it.
Oh,
I just
wow.
don't. I just don't find the joy of it. But I can see why people like it.
Yeah.
God, it really tastes like caramelized onions.
Yeah.
Wow.
But John, thank you again. We
Thank you.
appreciate you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
Yay.
But that wraps it up. My name is David.
And I'm Jasper.
And I'm Heidi.
And I'm John.
This is another episode of the Durian Pod. We will see you guys next time. Peace. Hey there. If you enjoyed that episode of Durian Pod, be sure to like, subscribe, comment. You can find us on all other platforms: Apple, Spotify, YouTube. See you at the next one.